I was invited this autumn to speak at an organization called 2020, and we agreed on my subject, US foreign policy and the Middle East and the Israel lobby, because this was a big issue in the newspapers at the time. And I heard nothing until about a week before my talk. I was informed by her secretary, the president of this organization's secretary, that we would be meeting at the Polish consulate, which is the usual place apparently where they met. And then the next week, 2 hours before I was supposed to talk, I had a telephone call from the organization's leader, terribly upset, saying the Polish consul general had cancelled the talk there at the consulate because of telephone calls he had received from the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League. Well, the consul's position I can understand is very difficult. Poland in this country, if you say to someone, Poland, the thought they have is anti-Semitism immediately. So Poland has a problem of overcoming this image here. The new Polish government, which is not a very attractive one, has nonetheless been working very hard to try to build good relations with Washington, to be friendly with Israel, to show that it's a good guy, and so on these subjects. And now suddenly someone comes along and says to the Polish consul general in New York, you know, Tony Judt is a very controversial character. He's anti-Israel. His remarks, some people think, are anti-Semitic. Are you sure you want to have him? Bad for your image, bad for your diplomacy. But why would the Poles stand up heroically for my right to speak? They have bigger concerns, so I don't blame them.
The lobby, what it's doing is it's going after people in a really hard-hitting way for the purposes of shutting us down, and also for the purposes of sending a message to other people that if you follow in the footsteps of Jimmy Carter, or you follow in the footsteps of Tony Judt, or you follow in the footsteps of John Mearsheimer and Steve Walt, you will pay a serious price for your transgressions. Right? So that's a deterrence model. They're trying to deter other people from doing what we did.
I was wondering if you can comment on the fact that in the press in the United States you are called an anti-Semite and demonizing the Jewish state concerning Human Rights Watch reporting in the Lebanon war.
Human Rights Watch's fairly extensive reporting during the war, reporting that I should say focused both on Hezbollah's indiscriminate attacks into Israel and on Israel's indiscriminate bombardment in Lebanon, was met by some reflexive defenders of Israel, not with rational discourse, not with a discussion of the facts, but with name-calling, including accusations of anti-Semitism, of blood libel, of you know, this or that. We're used to being attacked by, say, the governments who were criticizing. But in this case, the Israeli government was actually rather quiet. And indeed, we had what you might call a reasonable dialogue with the Israeli government in the course of the war about what was happening in Lebanon. But it was the supporters of the Israeli government, principally in the United States, although to a limited extent in Israel, who came at us full force. And that was unusual, because we rarely encounter that kind of coordinated attack by ostensibly private individuals, people who had no official position with the Israeli government, but who had assumed for themselves the position of reflexively defending Israel, regardless of its conduct. It's going to be a big political fight. We'll be working in it.
Thank you so much, and good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
Does it matter that you are Jewish?
I think in the course of the debate over the Lebanon war, it was significant because it was harder for the reflexive defenders of Israel to simply dismiss me as being anti-Semitic. It just didn't have any credibility. My father fled the Nazi Holocaust. My mother's parents fled pogroms in Poland and Belarus. I'm just not a candidate for anti-Semitism. And while there is the old kind of tired line of self-hating Jew, it doesn't describe me either, and nobody even really bothers with that kind of criticism anymore.
Why? Why? Why not just let ineffective people like me do our little talking? Here we have to come back to something else. It wasn't always like this. It began in the 70s. With the rise of identity politics in this country, where it became fashionable and eventually politically and economically normal for people to think of themselves as Black Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans. No one says, I'm a Jewish American. If someone says, you're a Jewish American, it has a slightly uncomfortable air to it. But they have to have an identity, the sense of the need to have the same kind of cultural identity as Italian Americans or Black Americans or Hispanic Americans have, has created in the American Jewish community two external identification tags. One is Israel, and the other is Auschwitz. So to speak, one in space and one in time. To be a Jew is to be moved by the memory of the Holocaust and to identify with Israel, even if you have no personal connection with the Holocaust and you've never been to Israel, which is true for most of them. The result is that they are extraordinarily sensitive, politically and personally. It's not an invented political thing. People feel this, to any suggestion that there is criticism of Israel or forgetting of the Holocaust, because it touches the core identity of American Jews.
The state of Israel is the dream of your ancestors, made a reality by your grandparents and your parents.
Every year, AIPAC has a conference where they bring in their supporters from around the country. They meet in Washington, a very powerful group that attempts to affect legislation and other aspects of U.S. policy on the Mideast. And it's sort of a gala affair. There's a Hollywood element where they produce these videos that show, they get people all mobilized and roused, sort of a pep rally atmosphere, and they get an extraordinary number of high officials to come.
America and Israel share an unbreakable bond.
AIPAC is one of the reasons why.
All of us share a fundamental belief that the freedom and security of Israel are a vital interest of the United States of America.
We need you now more than ever.
It's become like it's a ritual where the officials have to go to sort of show that they are on AIPAC's side. You know, half the Congress shows up, top administration officials, and they have a keynote speaker every year who is invariably at the very top.